I have my neighbor, good friend, Bill Frank, who's here on work release.
Hi, my guest today is my wife, Lucy. Bring it down for Kenny for the third time.
My wife Jan is here.
Bill Blackman, you got a guest?
Yeah, my wife Lee is here, and back when Al's joined with me.
All right, is that it?
No, there's one in, and he's right there. Get in.
So I brought my mom
And
and then my friend Sarah Harward. So.
Okay. Like I said, my name is
Time's
Al.
up, Al.
Pardon me?
Said time's up.
My name is Al Friend, but it's spelled F-R-E-U-N-D. The correct pronunciation is Freund, means friend in German. My great-grandfather came here from France right after the Civil War, and he was from France, not from Germany. But he was from Alsace-Lorraine, which is wine country. It's right on the border with Germany, and it had been disputed for many generations. But my ancestry goes back, I'm all French. My great-great-grandfathers fought for Napoleon II in the Crimean War in 1862. So I've got a medal that he was given. So that's my lineage. Now anyway, like I said, I'm Mr. Rotary. And I'm going to talk about me today.
Let me do the prayer first then.
Oh, I forgot about you.
And the fine message.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm supposed to go to prayer. Okay. First, let me say a little something about Alfred. We kind of came into Rotary together a little over 50 years ago. This guy has got perfect attendance for.
You're taking all my time.
I know I'm taking your time, but you deserve some recognition.
Yep.
So, Alfred, you're wonderful to be here. I didn't Gary Hill to be here too. So great to see you. Let's pray. As we gather together for another East Chapel Hill Rotary meeting, let us pause for a moment and appreciate our many blessings. For another gorgeous April in Chapel Hill, for our health and happiness, for our old and new friends at Rotary, and for another Freddie Kiger talk, we give thanks. Now bless this delicious food and fellowship. We pray in that name. Amen.
No, I'm starting to play basketball.
Al, can we mention one thing about the real quick? You're excused. You're excused, Fred.
I'll be quick, but I wanted to catch you before you gave up all your money to the kitty. I passed this brochure out to the tables today, so you should have a copy of it. I've also left some over by the exit. You may remember in the scuttlebutt, we're part of a district that has committed several $1,000s to helping to solarize a number of projects in Uganda. And so the plan is that money that goes into the kitty today and each of the next 2 weeks is going to go to the Uganda project. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Be generous. Thanks very much. Bye.
Okay. Like I said, I am Mr. Rotary, and I can prove that by a couple things. I joined Rotary in 1974. A neighbor of mine invited me to this club, and I fell in love with it right away. And I've been here ever since. I've got 50 years as a member of the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. And at the end of Mike's term as president this year, I'll have 48 years perfect attendance.
Good.
I was president of this club 1988 to 89. I've been on 8 mission trips with the dental group, 2 to Haiti and 6 to Honduras. And I played on the Rotary softball team. Now, maybe you don't know, we had a softball team. We played for many years and had good times, and we were the oldest team on the field. But anyway, that's my story. And since we're short of time, I'm going to move on here a little bit. I used to be famous for my camel jokes.
Infamous.
I can see people cringing right now, particularly Steve. But I've got one camel joke I think I can tell that it won't make too many people mad. Unless you're Polish, but anyway. There's 2 Polacks go into a used car lot to look at their car for a car. Okay. The salesman comes out of the office and he says, "Can I help you, gentlemen?" They said, "Yes, we would like to buy a car." The salesman says, "Well, how much money do you have?" Polak says, "Oh, we've got $50. The salesman said, "I'm sorry, but there's no way that I can sell a car for $50. So the Polak said, "Okay," and they started to leave. The salesman says, "Wait a minute, I have something I might can sell you." He goes around the back of his building and he comes back and he's got this camel. He says, "I can sell you this camel for $50. So the Polacks look at each other and they said, "Okay." So they get on the camel and they start down the street. The salesman looks at his watch and it's noontime, so he says, "I'll go to lunch." So he locks up his building, gets in his car, drives down the street, gets to the first stoplight, stops, looks over there on the right, and the 2 Polacks are sitting on the curb. So he rolls down the window and he says, "Where's that camel I just sold you?" Polak said, "Well, we came down the street and the light turned red and we stopped. And somebody over on the sidewalk said, 'Look at the 2 assholes on that camel.' We got off to look, light turned green, and the camel took off." I'm going to turn this over to our sitting president. Thanks.
Thank you, Al. Before I give my announcement, does anybody have anything? Tom, you gave yours. You got other announcements? I just have one. Rob Maitland has been able to expand our allotment for baseball tickets on Tuesday, and we have 2 spots remaining. So if you want one of those 2 or both of them, let me know, please. But right now I feel like the epitome of the undercard because you didn't come here to hear me talk. You came here for the main event, which is Freddie Kiger. And Freddie Kiger does not need an introduction. So, Freddie, please, come on up.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Despite the fact that on this date, as of 4:30 in the morning, 163 years ago, Confederate batteries opened on Fort Sumter, and 159 years ago, Confederate infantry surrendered on the Richmond-Lynchburg Stagecoach Road in Appomattox Courthouse. Today, given the fact we have brilliant sunshine, we have azaleas and flowers blooming, something lighthearted, something hopefully that will be of enjoyment and entertainment for you. I know everyone in the room was not necessarily a Carolina graduate, but I hope if you were not, that you'll find something within these tales that we will spin that you might find entertaining, informative, hopefully amusing. It's nice to be here and I appreciate it. And you don't know how special it is as a teacher to see people out there that once you had in class. Thank you all. You guys, I love you. And so we begin. A few nuggets about the University of North Carolina. When the first student arrived on campus, the United States President was George Washington. That student, who arrived February the 12th, 1795, came when only 15 states comprised the Union. His graduation in 1798 is significant. Carolina is the only state-supported university to admit and graduate a student in the 18th century. 226 years later, UNC has over 361,000 living alumni, and they can be found in all 50 states and 149 countries. Just this year, the U.S. News and Report announced that Carolina is the 4th best public university and 22nd overall. Our friends down the road, 7th best nationally. As to Chapel Hill, something perhaps you might find interesting. The United States average for those 25 years old and over and have a Bachelor of Arts degree is 35%. In North Carolina, 26%. Here in Chapel Hill, 74.6%. Only Cambridge, Massachusetts has more. Now, all those nuggets, I hope, are of some interest and are of note. But to be quite honest, notes, stats, facts, they have no soul. They have no substance. So, may I share a few of items with substance. Stories. It was a Thursday in the middle of a rough, messy winter in North Carolina. Governor Richard Dobbs Spate made an arduous journey from Raleigh to Chapel Hill, where he was welcomed by members of the Board of Trustees and other government officials. All were gathered in the not yet 2-year-old village of Chapel Hill to officially declare the state university was open. It was cold, windy, rainy, and the scene that Thursday looked more like a construction site than it did a college campus. Only 2-story east building and the unpainted wooden house of the presiding professor had been completed. The rest of the tiny campus was dotted with tree stumps, recently dug white clay, and piles of lumber. With the backdrop of a most rustic campus and governor and school officials gathered for the ceremony, there was one problem. Not one student showed up. It was a very inauspicious day. First day for the University of North Carolina. However, 3 weeks later, 18-year-old Hinton James arrived, and as legend has it, after walking from Wilmington some 150 miles in the dead of winter. So began the business of education here at UNC. And mind you, while Hinton James was quite the scholar, over the years, this university has had its fair share of characters, like this gentleman here, Kemp Battle Nye, who for years owned a record shop on Franklin Street. And though born in eastern North Carolina, he was raised in Grassy Creek, Ashe County, and like a latter-day Hinton James, reportedly walked the 147 miles to Chapel Hill in 7 days. Walking mostly at night to beat the heat and raiding roadside gardens for food, he arrived with $50 that his mother had sewn into the lining of his pants. He could only afford 1 year here at Carolina. So soon thereafter, he lied about his age, joined the United States Marines, and had incredible adventures in China. where in World War II he was highly decorated as a result of those adventures. Now, eventually he returned to Chapel Hill, and as I mentioned, owned and operated Kemp's record and high-fidelity shop at 205-207 East Franklin. And there he was the master of gimmick. He reduced record prices on the hour. He had all-night sales. He discounted records during rainstorms. He sold records by the pound. He sold them by the inch. The question Kemp battled nigh was the consummate showman. And never was that better illustrated than during his 1 year as a student at Carolina. Once, he bet a student that he could cross 5-acre Coker Arboretum in its entirety without a foot ever touching the ground. His inspiration? Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan of the Apes. It had just been made into a series of movies starring Johnny Weissmuller. Smitten by the Tarzan persona, Kemp made the bet, and in 1934, the Great Arboretum Tree Swing took place. The appointed day, and with the Arboretum packed with spectators, monitors took their stations along the nearly 2-city block route. Then, at the highly anticipated and appointed time, Nye emerged in loincloth. Though without Jane and Cheetah, he flexed his muscles, emitted a modified Tarzan yell, and in the southwestern corner of the Arboretum near Davy Hall today, Nye scampered up into a tree and nimbly began to crisscross and zigzag his way from limb to limb, tree to tree, while dumbfounded spectators, squirrels and chipmunks looked on. It took some doing, but he made it all the way across and won the bet, which was a bottle of chocolate milk and a sandwich each day for a week. Later on, a la P.T. Barnum, he gave tours of the Arb and, of course, detailed his route for anyone who wanted to ask and inquire. So, yes, if climbing trees had been a collegiate sport, Kemp battled Nye would have been a national champion. Speaking of titles, we at Carolina have had 50 NCAA championships, the most recent, field hockey, this past fall. But there's one national championship that didn't make the list. Perhaps you've heard of it. We had a national championship team back in 1974. And it was made up of 924 non-scholarship walk-ons. Personally, I remember as if it were only yesterday. It was a warm night back in the first week of March, and only a few days after the miraculous 8 points in 17 seconds comeback against Duke. Something magical was in the air. I keep stats now, and I did just that fateful night. And if you will, Kiger counter documenting history. It was here, in the bowels of Mangum Dorm, where the courageous 924 gathered and waited for their moment. Then, at the stroke of midnight, and with yours truly stationed at the lamppost pole across the street from the basement door of Mangum, the doors flew open, and I began to count, one by one, 924 streakers. Witnessed by thousands of students, estimated from 5,000 to 7,000, and inspired by the UNC pep band, the 860 men and 64 women, all without Nike or Adidas apparel, made their naked dash for the national streaking record. March Madness? No. March Uncladness. So indeed, that night, Carolina broke the existing record. But the moment was fleeting. For down in Athens, not Greece, the University of Georgia, those folks broke the record the very next night. Before the 924, for one night, They had their one pasty white and black shining moment. Yes, from the bowels and from the basement of Mangum Dorm, the very doors you see illustrated here. Today, those doors are a silent signal. Perhaps there should be a bronze plaque emblazoned over the basement door. And for this occasion, I have penned what it should probably read. Through these portals ran unclad mortals in their quest for immortality. Their names are lost to history and waistlines to gravity. Their deed fueled by spring and powered by youth. Their playful antics to remind them of a time when life itself seemed eternal. Their memories triggering today what they only wore that night, a smile. Segue to Carolina's most prominent landmark, which too brings smiles, the old well. Early on, it was the sole source for water on campus, and that water flowed from a spring that ran from just beneath. The structure that we enjoy today, that creates smiles for so many, was created in 1897 thanks to UNC President Edwin Anderson Alderman and Professor Joshua Walker Gore, who, well, they didn't like the existing structure. There it is. So President Alderman ordered the former structure, old and in sad shape, dismantled, and with the help of Professor Gore, the landmark we have was erected. Modeled after the Temple of Love at Versailles, a local lumber company completed the project at a modest cost of $200. Now, yes, we know stories flow from the old well, but across a campus of some 729 acres and over 300 buildings, there are so many more. Some from landmarks you've driven by and seen 1,000 times. Some tucked away, but all share one common thread. Just beneath the asphalt, the mortar, the brick and steel, there's an anecdote. For example, let's start with an unlikely landmark, one you've driven repeatedly. Manning Drive. Well, in 1953, university engineer Joe Haken got a call to meet a DOT state engineer down at the newly completed 2-lanes 15501 bypass. You see, Governor William Umstead had been in Keenan for the September 26, 29-7 win against NC State, and he, like so many still today, got caught in traffic on Ridge Road trying to get back to Raleigh. Now, when Joe Haken arrived that following Monday, after the game, he asked why he was there and learned that the governor was going to make sure that he never got stuck in another traffic jam. Umstead wanted a new road, and he wanted it done by the Duke game, which was 11 weeks away. Joining them, heavy equipment, and 25 striped-shirted prisoners. Haken was told to head off into the woods in the direction of Keenan Stadium. And so, without a map, and not really having any clue where he was going, Haken pushed off into the woods. About 100 yards into his trek, he heard noise behind him, growling, guttering noise, and he turned to see that the 25 prisoners were bringing down trees. There, wandering westward in the middle of the woods, and much to his horror, Haken realized he was the middle of the new road. Thus, thanks to Joe Haken's meandering, we have today. The next time you drive up Manning and wondering, why is this curving? It's poor Joe wandering through the woods. Okay. Let's kick on over to the scene of Governor Umstead's outing, one of the most beautiful settings in all of college football, Keenan Stadium. Now, football's been a very important part of Carolina lore since its very first season, 1888, when Grover Cleveland was our president. This site, our third on-campus site to play football, was given by William Rand Keenan Jr. of Union Carbide fame as a memorial to his parents. Yes, that fact today has raised eyebrows. But back then, set in a natural ravine, nestled in the woods where two small streams came together, the stadium was built. Now, there's been so much more than football in Keenan. Commencements, concerts, pep rallies, town and university events. And one such campus event has been University Day, and one in particular featured a most worthy guest. Before a crowd of some 30,000, President John F. Kennedy spoke in October of 1961. And 32 years later, to cap UNC's bicentennial festivities, President Bill Clinton made a keynote address in Keenan. He shared the stage with one of our own, Charles Kuralt of CBS's On the Road fame. And that night, Kuralt quipped that many of us came to Carolina because we couldn't afford to go to Duke. And just as you did, everyone in the crowd chuckled. And as they did, with perfect timing, he picked up and wouldn't have even if we could have. But yeah, Keenan has been a stage for celebration since its first game. And that took place November the 12th, 1927. The Hills defeated defeated Davidson 27-0. And 12 days later, on the 24th, Keenan Stadium was officially dedicated. Carolina responded with an emotional 14-13 win over then arch-rival Virginia. So with that, now's a good time for a few Carolina basics. Hopefully I'm not insulting your intelligence. Perhaps several of you have folks who ask, what's a Tar Heel? Well, there are several versions to the story, but for the one I've heard most, we got to go back to North Carolina's colonial history. You see, we have lots of pine trees. And all through the coastal plain where our state's history began, we have tall, long-leaf pines. And those stately gifts of nature served as the basis for our colonial economy. Tar, pitch, and turpentine, collectively known as naval stores. Those products literally kept the English Navy and its merchant marine afloat. Visitors to North Carolina recounted and recorded the spectacle of seeing many barefooted North Carolinians who regularly walked through those long-leaf pine forests, and because they did, had tarred resin on the bottom of their heels. Tree and naval stores became so associated with our colony and state, it of course became not only our state's nickname, but a unique moniker for this university. We are Tar Heels, and share that nickname with no one else. But an historical note. For many years, being called a Tar Heel was a slap in the face. The term inferred a backward rube or an uneducated clodhopper. But interestingly, the American Civil War helped to change all that. The story goes that after a spring 1864 battle in Virginia, a group of Virginians and North Carolinians began to bark and hoot at one another. And after being teased about whether there was any tar left down in the old North State, one good old North Carolinian retorted that maybe more should be found and placed on the hills of the Virginians so they might stick better in the next fight. Well, that exchange was communicated to another man who's taking a beating in history, Robert E. Lee. But Lee heard the story, smiled, and mused aloud. God bless those tar-heeled boys. It was a positive spin. And like tar, it stuck. So now that we've talked about the Tar Heel thing, why light blue or Carolina blue and white as Carolina's colors? Now those distinctive hues came from two debating societies that were established here on campus in the 1790s, making them the second oldest in the nation behind Princeton. For commencement, the Philanthropic Society chose white as its distinctive color, and the Dialectic Debating Society, light blue or Carolina blue, hence our colors. Now, the blue you see on this particular image is much, much darker. The light blue then was indeed light blue. But that's our colors from the two debating societies. So we mentioned the Tar Heel nickname, Carolina's colors. Why the heck do we have a ram as a mascot? Well, we got to go back to 1924 when cheerleader Vic Huggins of later Huggins Hardware fame reasoned that if the University of Georgia had a bulldog and North Carolina State has a wolf, well, the Heels needed a mascot too. So Huggins persuaded athletic business manager Charlie Woolen, as in Woolen Jim, to fork over $25, and the quest for a suitable mascot began. Shipped from Texas to Chapel Hill, introduced at a pep rally before the VMI game. Oh, a mascot only to be rivaled by few. That was it. That was a ram. Why a ram? 2 seasons earlier, a bruising fullback, the man highlighted in this image, Jack Merritt, led Carolina to a 9-1 record in a Southern Football Conference championship. So bruising he was nicknamed the Battering Ram, thus Huggins' inspiration. And on November the 8th, 1924, Ramesses was introduced. Carolina was locked in a scoreless tie with a then powerful VMI team. Late in the game, Bun Hackney was called upon to attempt a field goal. Before going in, he rubbed Ramesses' head and then promptly drop-kicked a 30-yard field goal to win the game 3-0. Ramesses' storied presence began. We've had 21 more. Today we have Ramesses 22. But here's a Hugh Morton photograph from the late 40s, maybe early 50s, during the Justice era. If you're having trouble distinguishing which is the ram and which is the human, on the left, with 2 rather than 4 legs, that's handler GB, appropriately nicknamed Bushy Cook. But the 2 together may beg the question, who was the first to be sheared? Okay, now please allow me to shepherd you over to an athletic facility that has a story. And playing off the Ramesses story, sorry for the bad pun, let's saunter over to Woolen Jim. It was built by the PWA in 1937-1938 and named for our Ram procurer, Charles T. Woolen, principal executive for RJR and business manager for UNC. Now, when head coach Frank McGuire arrived on campus, he wanted Woolen Jim to rival State's Reynolds Coliseum. The first time he walked into Woolen, he asked for the lights to be turned on, and we're told, Coach, they are. Well, there were other problems. In 1955, it seems there were leaks. It was going to cost $20,000 to get them fixed. UNC officials complained, but we're told the state doesn't have that kind of money for that. Well, UNC's Vice President, William D. Uncle Billy Carmichael Arena, had a solution. On a Monday following a Saturday home game against NC State, word came in that $20,000 had just been allocated from the Emergency Contingency Fund. What the heck happened in the course of 2 days? Well, it seems Carmichael got some tickets and gave them to members of the Appropriations Committee of the General Assembly. It rained like crazy the Saturday they were in Woolen. And guess where everyone's seats were? Directly under the leaks. Okay, let's dribble across the street to what used to be the Josephus Daniel Student Stores, a name also that has most recently been dropped. UNC Student Stores first opened its doors 14th September 1968. Then named for Daniels, he had been the publisher of the Raleigh News and Observer and had served as Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of the Navy. And boy, he shook things up. No more condoms issued to sailors. You're not going to call it port and starboard anymore. It's going to be left and right. And he was also a teetotaler. And believing that everybody else should be as well, he ended the centuries-old time-honored rum ration for the United States Navy. Well, and as the story goes, when angry sailors asked derisively for their Java, they asked, ready for this? They asked for a cup of Old Joe. Ah. Okay, let's percolate over to Wilson Library. Completed in 1929, it was named for Lewis Round Wilson, Keenan Professor, first director of the UNC Press, and university librarian for 31 years. Inside, you'll find the North Carolina collection, the rare book collection, and over 20 million items that comprise the Southern Historical Collection. The story goes that back in 1929, there was a little disagreement about naming the library after Wilson. See, another family, a powerful family, thought it should be named for them, the Moorheads. And when it wasn't, they, the miffed Moorheads, got even with the powers that be in South Building. Story goes that when the 172-foot tall Moorhead Patterson Bell Tower was completed in 1931, it was designed to be in perfect alignment from South Building, where the decision had been made, to the dome of the Wilson Library, then to the Bell Tower. From the image, an architectural dunce cap, if you will, to visually give the South Building folks a daily reminder that they dropped the ball. Yet, that view from South Building back into Polk Place is so very delightful. It's one of Carolina's busiest intersections. It is a panorama of youthful energy. It bears the name of the 11th United States President, James Knox Polk, who lived in South Building and graduated with honors in the UNC class of 1818. This quad named for him teems with history and memories. For example, there in Bingham Hall in the 50s and 60s, imagine you being an undergraduate and sitting in the same room when Robert Frost shared his poetry with you. And here in Murphy Hall, many scenes for the 1998 film Patch Adams were shot, as well as 1968 Three in the Attic. If you haven't seen that movie, you will live longer. And in that same theatrical vein, here in Steel Building, there young Andy Griffith lived and devised quite an interesting alarm clock. A notoriously sound sleeper, he would attach a rope to one of his ankles and throw the other end out the window, to which early rising friends heading to class would grab and tug to wake up the future sheriff of Mayberry. And then right across the quad, a Twilight Zone kind of moment at Gardner Hall. Begun in 1950-1951, it was named for Depression Governor O. Max Gardner, who also served as Undersecretary of the Treasury for FDR. With construction just underway, our friend Joe Hagan of Manning Drive fame watched 8 workers digging a deep ditch for what was to be Gardner Hall's southern foundation. He couldn't see the workers, but he could hear them, and definitely could hear them scream. He watched all 8 jump out of that deep trench, some 7 to 8 feet deep. The reason? In their digging, they excavated skeletons cadavers that had once been used by the medical school's anatomy department. How was your day, dear? Okay, let's shake a leg and head a little north to the Y building, the YMCA building. Built in 1907, novelist Thomas Wolfe wrote there in an unheated room on the second floor. And it was the scene of some Chapel Hill firsts. The first movie shown, the first jukebox in town. And just across the Y court is Gerard Hall. Begun in 1822, eventually completed in 1837. It was named for Major Charles Gerard, who donated 14,000 acres to UNC. Fairly recently, it's been refurbished inside for many years. This was the intimate setting for commencement. Presidents James Knox Polk and James Buchanan spoke there while in office. Woodrow Wilson spoke there before being elected. And Chief Executive Andrew Johnson was there after his presidency. And it was here in 1875 that trustees, UNC faculty, and townfolk officially celebrated the reopening of UNC after being closed for 4 years. Now, the real campus gym we have across the street, or just down the street, Memorial Hall. Perhaps some of you were there last night for the North Carolina Symphony. It's a beautiful structure. And after an $18 million renovation about 2015, it's state-of-the-art. This, however, was not the original on the site. The first Memorial Hall was built in 1885, and honestly, it was god-awful ugly. Well, there it is. The Addams Family Summer Home. It was described as architecturally illiterate. A foreshortened hexagon like a fat coffin. Many thought the structure was jinxed. Indeed, the architect died of sunstroke, and the assistant architect and chief mason both committed suicide. So nobody shed a tear when it was raised in 1930, and a second Memorial Hall came into existence. Now, a quick story about Memorial after a 1957 renovation. During an inspection, our woolen gym leak-fixing friend, Uncle Billy Carmichael, looked up at the arch above the stage and blurted, "Good Lord, we're going to have to fix that." Everybody in the inspection party was like, "What has he found now?" Well, he pointed to the university's seal. Now, what you see here is our seal. But that is not what eagle-eyed Carmichael saw. The seal he saw had been above the stage for 27 years and nobody had noticed anything unusual. He did. Seems the bar across the seal should have run like you see, from top left to bottom right. But on the seal above the stage, the bar ran from bottom left to top right. What the heck's the big deal? Well, top left to bottom right, like you see here, is bar register. Bottom left to top right is bar sinister. In coat of arms parlance, for 27 years, as Mr. Carmichael ascertained, the seal that he saw signaled we were the bastard son of the state of North Carolina. They had it correct. Okay, let's sashay across Cameron Avenue. Built in 1913, named for UNC's third president, David Lowry Swain. Swain Hall was used first as a student eating commons, where the food was so bad, students renamed it. They renamed it Swine Hall. But many of you may remember it as classes for Rudy Van, RTV MP, and UNC Television. Now, to my personal favorite part of campus, the oldest, McCorkle Place and Person Hall. First built in 1797 and named for benefactor General Thomas Person. It's the second oldest state university building in the United States. Only one older, Old East. Originally, it was a chapel, but over the years, 14 different usages have been found for Person. Now, the design is interesting, but if you look on the south side of Person Hall, you'll find a statue of the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's highlighted there, Stephen Langston, who died in 1288, and two 2-ton gargoyles. All of them were donated in 1933 by art patron Catherine Pendleton Arrington. Where the heck she get these from? From London's Big Ben. They were about to be misused, thrown away. She bought them and brought them back. Okay, let's head east-southeast to appropriately South Building. William Richardson Davies' Temple of Folly, as it was called by critics, began in 1798. They didn't have enough money to finish it until 1814. Yep, it sat there for 16 years without a roof. And when UNC was closed from 1871 to 75, horses and cows were stable inside the building. Now, we've established that James Knox Polk lived on the 3rd floor. And where you see highlighted, that was his room, southwestern corner. But we have another notable over in McCorkle Place, UNC's first president. You've walked by this monument and memorial many times. It's to Joseph Caldwell, who was Carolina's first president. Reportedly, he's buried at the eastern base along with his second wife, Helen Hogg Hooper, and her son from a first marriage, Dr. William Hooper. Now, Caldwell was originally buried in the old cemetery, Chapel Hill. But he was moved. And then he was moved again. In fact, over a 70-year period, poor Caldwell was dug up 3 times and given a new resting place. But being moved all over the place gave rise to the loose talk around town that he was a man about town. And nearby, a recent addition, the Unsung Founders Memorial. Erected in 2005 by the class of 2002, it is to remember people of color, bond and free, who helped to build many of these structures we've mentioned. It is interesting to note that in the memorial's inscription, the words black nor slave appear. And from that meaningful landmark, well, let's take a peek over at Spencer Dorm. Built in 1924, named for Cornelia Phillips Spencer, this for many years was where proper co-eds lived. Now, in the late 50s, the 2nd and 3rd floors got new one-way glass for the bathroom windows. You know where this is going. All of a sudden, Spencer Dorm became quite the sensation. Must have been quite a scene, for across the street, on the wall outside of the president's house, male students with this view perched for hours like crows on the power line. Oh yeah, there was a reason. It seems the contractors installed the one-way glass backwards. You couldn't see outside from the inside, but oh yes, you could see from the outside looking in. If only Cornelia had been staring back, I would have taken care of the peeping Toms. Now, Cornelia Phillips Spencer was a remarkable lady. She was a chapel Hillian for 69 years. She rang the bell on March the 20th, 1875, her birthday, to announce that UNC got the funding that would allow them to reopen. And one North Carolina politician called her the smartest woman in North Carolina. And the smartest man, too. Well, for this whirlwind tour, what better place to end? Tradition says it all started. The Davy Poplar, named for William Richardson Davy. Many consider him the founding father of Carolina, where supposedly university selection committee members rested and decided to locate the state's university here. Remarkably, there in McCorkle Place, that landmark, that tulip poplar, is still with us, where it has borne witness to 3 centuries of history, spanning a time from 15 to 50 states, from 1 student to now over 30,000, from 1 building to now over 300. And in between, with all the challenges, changes, and growth, our natural wonder has marked time. Back in 1873, when the university was closed, thanks to Reconstruction politics, Nature itself seemed to voice its disapproval when lightning split the tree from base to its upper limbs. And in 1902, high winds ripped 2 large limbs from its trunk. Yet even as we gather, like a sentinel, it still stands. An over 200-year-old tulip poplar that, as legend has it, as long as it stands, so will this university. And to ensure that tradition, that history, that legacy, the senior class of 1918 took no chances. They were planted in March of that year, Davy Jr. And in 1993, Davy III. And to further ensure seedlings have been collected and planted in all 100 counties of this state, as well as the Cherokee Reservation. Thousands of seedlings more have been preserved so that figuratively and literally that tree and this university will live on. For well over 2 centuries, a constant reminder of Carolina's past, present, and future mission to welcome all and instill them with a challenge to not only better themselves, but their community, their state, their nation, this world. You know, I am very aware that many in this room did not go to Carolina, but you and those of us who did share something quite unique. First, we share Carolina's very name and our organization. Indeed, we are East Chapel Hill Rotary. And all of us who wear the blue and gold wagon wheel pin, we share a second thing, an even more important connection. We share the same mission, same challenge, to seek the truth, to be fair, to build goodwill, and benefit all. We share the same drive to make better everything around us. That's something William Richardson Davy and James Hogg, the founding fathers of this university, and in 1905, when Paul Harris created Rotary. That mission? To spread enlightened goodness to all. Thank you. I have 10 minutes. Would anyone like to ask questions? Or if you have some place that you need to spiral off into, please do so. Yes, sir. The first, I'm sorry? Toilet. Oh, my goodness. 1989. You know what? Actually, I do have an idea. In Thomas Wolfe's memoirs, and he wrote extensively in his stay here from 1916 to 1920. And by the way, he stayed in Battle Dorm, right across the street from the post office, room number 4. He talks about hot water being now accessible to students. So sometime between 1916 and 1920, according to Thomas Wolfe's memoirs, it appears that pipes and sanitation were brought into the dorms.
Ready?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's back here in the back. How you doing?
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Fred. Oh, fabulous.
Thank you.
You referenced that 8-point comeback against Duke.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit something that I probably haven't ever admitted before, and that is that I was at the game with a friend who had played for Davidson under Lefty, and we were behind by 8 points with 17 seconds to go, and Bobby Jones was on the line. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, "Hey, no way Bobby Jones has made 2 foul shots all year." So we left. Well, we got outside, and we heard a cheer, and we thought, somebody must be stricken. So we headed in a run, and then we heard all these cheers, everybody going nuts, and we said, "Where's all the stricken?" We couldn't find it, so we stopped at that fraternity right across from the Carolina Inn, and we said, there were guys on the roof dancing. We said, what's going on? They said it's in overtime. We said, how? So we went into that fraternity house, did not know a soul, and watched the overtime. So.
Good one, Joe.
I apologize. We're going to have to cut the questions short for a special presentation.
Okay.
Timbo, you never have to apologize to this guy. Freddie, how many of these have you done, you think, presentations to our club? You don't have any idea, do you? I don't either. How many sergeant in arms have you done? Who knows how many you've done? What we do know is you never refuse a request to do a presentation like this or to do a sergeant in arms. And what we do know is that your service to our community, to our university, to the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club has been very, very special over time. Every now and then, the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club Foundation receives a donation, and the donor decides not to recognize someone in his or her family or whatever. And if that's the case, then the board of directors of the foundation can make an award of a Phil Rominger Fellow. We've done that twice, only twice. 1921, Al over here at the curmudgeon table, and Peggy somewhere, she in the crowd. But Freddie, on behalf of the board of directors of the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club and all of the East Chapel Hill Rotary Club, we'd like to present to you this Phil Rominger Fellowship.
Wow. You cannot believe how touched I am. I just think we remember 1997, 98, when the first time they placed around my neck a Paul Harris Fellowship ribbon medal. And then I think of all the people who wore that medal, who continue to wear it, and all the people seated in this room and the wonderful things they have been doing and continue to do and what they've done for this town and community, for this state, for this organization. I am humbled beyond belief. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Take a question or two. We have 5 minutes. Come on, Timmy.
I'm not going to answer that. Tell about Miss Ophelia.
Oh, Ophelia Cunningham. You know what? That's another talk. That's another talk. What I need to do for you down the road, whenever you're ready to have me back, is let me do the talk that I have prepared on Chapel Hill characters, of which Ophelia Cunningham is one. Miss Manners, who was a cigarette-smoking lady who went through Lenore Hall with an umbrella, whacking students that had their feet on tables, cracking over heads if you didn't put your seat back under the table. That's a perfect next talk, somewhere down the road. Anybody else? Much love. Thank you.
Bill, we've been together for a long time. Two questions. First, after all the time here, your favorite eating place and the best milkshake in Chapel Hill.
Best milkshake. Ooh, best milkshake used to drive back to Winston-Salem to Tom's Drive-In. You know, what about the Outback? Not that Outback. What is it called? Cookhouse. How are they?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't had one yet. Bill, I don't know. You know what? I'll go with Sutton's. I'll go with Sutton's because it's handmade and what have you. And as far as favorite eating place, you know what? I still miss Blackie Sanders, the peddler. Does anybody remember that place? Yeah, Blackie Sanders, the pub. Yeah, we've been here. Who's been here the longest? Now we'll turn this into like an audience response kind of thing. Who's been here since the 1940s? 1950s? 1950s? Julie, Julie, can you give us an idea?
I was born in 1952, and I wanted to note from your slide with football players that my great-grandfather was Moose Tinney, and he was on your slide. And you didn't say anything about it.
I left so much on the carpet floor that I wanted to include for fear that I would encroach upon time. Yeah. No, of course, Tinney Circle. Tinney Circle, well, you know where you're raised because we think that during the spring and summer of 1865, Union cavalry from Illinois, Ohio, camped right along the ridge down there, along the Horace Williams house and down into your neck of the woods. And they have found cavalry gear and what have you in the yard of the Horace Williams house. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, Linda.
Question. So the football player Merritt that you showed us, is Merritt's grill named after him?
No, that's a different Merritt, but could very well be the same family. Mr. Merritt used to live on Pritchard Avenue in a little Sears and Roebuck craftsman home. He was about halfway down the street with his wife. At the time, you could go to the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and you could get to that places, and you could buy your house. It was like a big kit. It was like Lincoln Logs. And you'd order it, they'd bring it on a railroad car, unload it, and bring it in. His house, I looked it up, would cost about $800 back in the 1920s. But it's the same family, Merritt Mill Road, Merritt's. Oh gosh, I could tell like 5 stories about that guy. That guy was crazy. He used to drive James and his brother Livingston Taylor nuts down the old store. He glued a quarter onto the floor to watch kids come in and see it, and then try as best they could to get away from parents and anyone watching so they could reach down, only to be reminded that it was glued to the floor. Yeah, Cliff?
Jack Merritt was a policeman in Chapelville after he graduated, and his daughter, Jackie Merritt, married Linda's first cousin.
That's right there.
Jackie is 94. They still come to every home ball game, every home football game, and all of his cousins are there. It was one of Linda's cousins, his best friend, is one of our Rotary members. He's always.
Wow, that's a good story.
And when on the 100th anniversary of Ramsey's last year, they took Ramsey's and had his picture made with Jackie Merritt.
Oh, that's cool. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Guys, thank you.